Hello, and welcome to today's summer virtual panel on strong partnerships to support SEL integration in teacher education programs. My name is Amanda Rothengas, the Program Manager for Sanford Inspire, and I will be your moderator for today. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to go over the format for today. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and slide deck will be shared with you in 24 to 48 hours. We will have 3 20-minute presentations today, and at the end of each presentation, there will be time for you to ask any questions. During the presentation, type in any questions you may have in the question box, and we will ask our panelists the questions at the end of each of their presentations. We will also have time at the end of the 3 presentations for final questions for any panelists. I am thrilled that we have 5 esteemed panelists today sharing their experience working with partners to integrate social emotional learning in teacher education programs, which we know is critical to the foundation of supporting our future teacher workforce. First, I would like to tell you a bit more about each of our panelists. For our first presentation, we will hear from Dr. Judy Mantle. Named Dean of National University's Sanford College of Education in September 2014, Dr. Judy Mantle brings to this important position the multifaceted experience she gained as a special education educator and administrator. In addition to building programs, Dr. Mantle has also contributed to the development of academic infrastructure, including faculty policies, bylaws, and graduate council policies. Welcome, Dr. Mantle.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased and honored to serve on this esteemed panel.
For our second presentation, we will hear from Dr. Jo Nicole Sent and Dr. Sally Drew from Central Connecticut State University. Dr. Jo Nicole Sent is a professor of special education and program coordinator for Central Connecticut State University's Department of Special Education and Interventions. She teaches both graduate and undergraduate courses in special education. She cares deeply about teacher preparation and its impact on K-12 students. Dr. Sally Drew is an associate professor of special education and interventions at Central Connecticut State University. She has embedded social and emotional learning into coursework across teacher and leader preparation programs in elementary, secondary, and special education and educational leadership. Welcome, Dr. Nicole Sent and Dr. Drew.
Hi, pleased to be here. Thank you very much. We're excited to be here.
For our third presentation, we will hear from Dr. Markowitz and Dr. Gallagher from San Jose, California. Dr. Nancy Markowitz is a national leader on the topic of integrating social, emotional, and cultural competencies in teacher preparation. As founder and executive director of the Center for Reaching and Teaching the Whole Child in San Jose, California, she focuses on integrating social, emotional, and cultural competencies into teaching and learning across the teacher professional development continuum. Dr. Michael Gallagher is Deputy Superintendent for the Sunnyvale School District in Sunnyvale, California, and has served the public schools of Santa Clara County for more than 30 years. He has played a leadership role in the district's efforts to support the social emotional dimensions of teaching and learning for students, teachers, and staff. Welcome, Dr. Markowitz and Dr. Gallagher.
Hello, we're delighted to be here.
Now, without further ado, we'll begin our first presentation with Dr. Mantle, where we learn more about National University, the new master's program in development, and the successful partnership with local school districts to advance social emotional learning in children via Sanford Harmony and Sanford Inspire.
Thank you very much. I think I'll begin with a little bit about National University, a bit of background here since we are lead sponsor of this particular project. I have been involved with the Sanford initiatives that we're hosting at National University since the very beginning, which was approximately 5 years ago. And this began our very significant collaborations with our chancellor, Dr. Michael Cunningham, and our funder, Mr. Denny Sanford, who is businessman, philanthropist, and entrepreneur, who has given generously of himself throughout the United States and the world in support of education and medical initiatives in particular that have helped to advance cultures in many, many locations. National University School of Education was named the Sanford College of Education in December 2015. We are a very large enterprise in the education preparation arena. We're noted as the 10th largest academic unit in education in the country. At this university, we're serving approximately 10,000 students. We have 51 programs in California and also in Nevada. And most of those are in California, but another 10 in Nevada. And now we host a doctoral program in organizational innovation. We are accredited by NCATE and came in as a first-time accreditation under the legacy year, which was 2014. And of course, we're also required to be accredited by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So we prepare more teachers in California than any other institution of higher education, and we have done this for the past 15 years. So we have a large footprint, I guess, and so I feel very fortunate that this mega gift, this very unusual gift of $100 million from Mr. Sanford came to us in 2017. And this gift is supporting three major initiatives, one that is a very huge significance in our talk today, Sanford Harmony, and also Sanford Inspire. We also host an institute, the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, where we prepare leaders for nonprofit organizations specializing in fundraising. So this has really been a huge enhancement to our college. And with that enhancement came a very big charge in that our chancellor came to me and said, what are you going to do to evolve a world-class education unit when the naming happened in 2015? And so our charge is to develop a world-class teacher preparation program focused on producing inspiring teachers and featuring social emotional learning. Today, we will focus on some of the initiatives that are under our watch in our Sanford College of Education. There are several, but we'll focus on two of them today. One, curriculum development, and what we've done in the last 3 years in particular in that arena, and then also the evolution of what we call our Sanford College of Education, or abbreviated internally here, SCOE, Sanford Showcase Schools, which has really evolved into a very exciting project. So with curriculum development, following our accreditation, we actually had an opportunity to pause and challenge ourselves to really look at the Sanford initiatives and see how we might better integrate and weave many of the concepts, and especially inspire in the initial phase. We'll call that phase one, which was prior to the major gift. But again, following our accreditation, I challenged our faculty to really take a deep dive into our teacher preparation curriculum, and let's see what we can do to better integrate and infuse these concepts across our programs. And we actually began in phase one with Sanford Inspire. And the word inspire just absolutely gave a charge to everyone who was in the room in conversation about what can we do to produce inspiring teachers. And as a matter of fact, we hosted several meetings of the collaborative right here in Torrey Pines in the Sanford Education Center, where we really had that conversation, an exciting conversation into what produces, what do we need to do? How do we define an inspiring teacher? And then what do we need to do to evolve inspiring teachers out of our programs? So we began with that and actually completely rewrote our initial and advanced teacher preparation programs over about a 2.5 to 3 year process. That was phase one, and again, prior to the major gift. And then I will move on to phase two. Following the major gift, or with the major gift, came another opportunity for us, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's focused on teachers, scholars, but it is tied to phase two, where we took our MED in education, which is an initial teacher preparation program, and we added the option of a 3-course emphasis so that those who elected to do it could pursue these 3 courses in an emphasis area of social emotional learning. As you can see, the courses are an introductory course, then a social emotional learning in action course, and then a research and social emotional learning course as well. And all 3 of them comprising that emphasis was elective, but could become part of their program. And that was a way we could more formally adopt some solid content and give it the particular emphasis that we wanted it to have in our curriculum. Our idea is to ultimately evolve teacher leaders in this area of social emotional learning. And that certainly comes with the charge that we develop a world-class teacher prep program. So we want teacher leaders out there. This is a beginning step. I'll call it a really initial step, more formally through the curriculum process and evolving this kind of a concentration. Then in what I'll call our phase 3, which is our current phase, we are in development of an MAT in social emotional learning. And it will not be tied to a teaching credential. It'll be a program that is going to really bridge the theory with the practice. It will focus on teacher leadership, and it will allow us to, I hope, put down a very good footprint. And I'm going to move to the next slide because I'm going to show you some secret sauce here, which is called our Sanford Harmony Scholars Program. Along with this gift came a total of 150 Sanford Harmony Scholars. These will be students coming in a competitive arena, will become eligible to pursue one of our options in our programming. We're just really getting started with this. Again, we began with the 3-course emphasis tacked on to our MED. We'll have the MAT and SEL. I've got another couple of things brewing in SEL. And I should also note that across all of our ed admin programs and our service programs in pupil personnel services, which is school counseling and school psychology in California, there is terrific interest in this area, and our faculty are already exploring how they too will be working together to best integrate some outstanding content into their programs. But I'm very pleased to note that we will be able to literally give 30 full scholarships over 5 years, and that will total 150 Sanford scholars that we hope will become ambassadors for our program. And we would like them to, these teachers, these are teachers who will become spokespersons, I hope, for the social emotional learning initiative throughout the country. So this program will be available throughout the United States. and even, I guess, outside the United States, since it will be totally online. And our job is to really help promote social emotional learning in a very big way. And I am totally committed to evolving the strong teacher voice. So we want the kind of individual who can become even media worthy and become good spokespersons out at the front edge of this movement. So I'm really excited about where we're going to go with teacher scholars. I have named 4 thus far. We have a call for more. I can name another 30 this year after a teacher selection process and their recommendations. To me, I look forward to naming many others this year, and right behind it, we'll be naming some more. So those individuals, some might be taking the emphasis program, some might be taking the full MAT program, which we plan to have launched by next fall. With that program, we are in development with several thought leaders, very high thought leaders who are reputable and have been longtime researchers in this area in the United States. They are in consultation with us, and they will be going through 3 rounds of review of the faculty proposed curriculum. And we hope to evolve a stellar curriculum in this area, and one that will be sought after by many in the United States and hopefully throughout the world. So this is an exciting area for us in curriculum development, and I'm glad we began it when we did. We're simply continuing our trajectory, and it's moving along at a very, very good pace, and there's a lot of excitement about this in our college. I will switch gears now and move to another project that evolved about the same time we began our curriculum work, and that is what we call, again, our SCOE, Sanford Showcase Schools Research Project. This evolved also out of our world-class report to the Chancellor, where he asked how we will become world-class, and after much deliberation over that question, I evolved an idea that I thought would help us in our understanding and employment of both Sanford and Harmony programs in the schools. I really wanted us to bridge to the schools. And here in San Diego County, I mean, we're a very large, diverse county. We're diverse in every diversity component imaginable. And we're comprised across San Diego City and San Diego County of about 42 school districts. And some are mega, some are smaller, but we are in what I'd call really urban and also rural areas, and again, very richly diverse. So I was able to seek the funding and receive the funding for an initial 5 schools in our first year, 10 schools total in our second year, and this year we'll be adding another 5 schools to this project. And this project is focused on employing both Sanford Harmony and Sanford Inspire in single schools. So as you can see, Sanford Harmony is focused on child development in the area of social emotional learning, but with Inspire, we narrowed down these modules that are available free of charge to all teachers across the country, and we're focused on just a very small number that had more affinity towards social emotional learning. And what we wanted to do was get the support of school administrators, and by that I mean we had superintendent approval as well as principal approval, and in most cases board approval, school board approval, so that we can move ahead with this project. And teachers would be provided with the Sanford Harmony materials backed up by professional development. There were certain requirements so that the program was implemented with fidelity in those single schools. And also the teachers would be required to take at least 3 of those modules. They would engage with at least 3 of those modules tied to social emotional learning, and that would be used in conversation in whole school meetings. So this was this has been a very exciting initiative that has resulted in an annual conference for the past over the past 2 years in June of each year, and people are fighting to be on the platform because they want to share all that has happened and in such a very brief period of time, actually, and the utility of these programs that are very popular and get positive results very quickly. So they're easy to adopt, they're easy to use. It really helps a lot with the interactions in the schools, and teachers report that they're finding more time for instruction because we have some new ways of engaging that reduce some of the negative behaviors and allow more time for constructive and positive interactions and collaborations between kids and between kids and adults. So we evolved the project, and it has served many purposes for us. It really has allowed us to engage with the schools in a very rich manner. And we have people coming to us wanting to be part of the projects now. So that part has been really fun, and it also provides us with a new avenue so that we have some professional practice sites for our people in preparation to become teachers. So the research is conducted, our evaluation projects conducted in coordination with Johns Hopkins University. Our president of National University was a former dean of the School of Education at Johns Hopkins University, was ranked #1 in the nation under his stewardship. And he brought us some researchers who have come in and really bridged with us in a very meaningful way, so that they are really questioning the teachers, even parents. There's student questionnaires, all kinds of classroom observations. They have bridged in a very real way in an applied research format, primarily, that has really brought us 2 rich reports over the past 2 years, and now we enter year 3. So as you can see here, our findings have been very positive. Overall, those who adopt these programs just really appreciate the utility of them. There's they're accessible, the materials are there, the backup professional development and training is there for the teachers. You can use it a little bit, you can use it a lot. It can be woven in with different pieces of content that you'd like to present. And it really leads to lots of discussion about changes in school climate and in school culture. And I think that is what has brought us a great deal of attention, is that we're helping to promote this through our college in coordination with the Sanford education programs. So we have been on quite a learning trajectory, and we continue to scale up. We will go into our 3rd year, and we'll see where it goes from here. But the important thing to know is that Sanford Harmony, which we believe is one of many tools available out there in the wider scheme of things, but it's a powerful tool, and it's one that is attractive, and it's one it's easy to implement. So it picks up popularity pretty quickly because it's not perceived as a real invasive type of intervention by the teachers nor the administrators. So it's very, very workable, and we're really happy to be part of all of this. As you can see, we're going into year 1, year 2, year 3. Now we'll extend this research, and this year we're going to go more deeply into teacher perception and principal perception of changes in school culture and school climate, because we think that's what's next. And last slide here, we have listed our partners. I mean, these are the groups we're in partnership with, and many of these universities and colleges are being nurtured toward MOUs if they don't have an MOU. So we think we're in a distinguished group of colleagues, and I can tell you that the conversations that we've hosted here in Torrey Pines have been just outstanding and very exciting. So we hope to work with all of you in the future. And we have a contact slide. Should you like any more information about any aspects of the work that we've done, there's my contact information. If I don't know the answer, which I may not, we will get you to a broad team of talented people who have terrific expertise who will get answers for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mantle, for your informative presentation. We now have time if there are any questions about the content that Dr. Mantle shared. Please go ahead and type them in your question box if you do have any questions. I did want to ask Dr. Mantle, what do you think the biggest takeaway you have learned from working with the Showcase schools?
Well, I think that what we have learned is that we have the opportunity to form a new level of relationships with the schools. You know, we come to the schools really gift-bearing with Sanford Harmony and with Sanford Inspire resources, which are free to teachers. And at first, I'm not sure they really believe it's free and, you know, what's the hook, what's behind all of that. But they learn very quickly that we're extremely genuine in our motives here. Our motives are very simple. We want to help in this very important area of social emotional learning. And we're there to really bring resources to those schools and formulate a new kind of dialogue and interaction with them. And I think the most gratifying part for me is to see how these relationships have evolved with our faculty team and with those involved in the Sanford project with the school personnel. And as I said, this meeting we had in June, our showcase meeting here had to be extended in time because everybody wanted to present. And we certainly were not going to exclude anyone from having that opportunity. So it's the gift of new friendships and new relationships, really.
Thank you so much. And if anybody would like further information about the research study, how can they get that information?
They can simply contact me, and we'll be sure that we'll get you an electronic version of both of the reports. Again, the evaluation reports were produced by two researchers at Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Stephen Ross and Dr. Jennifer Morrison, both very accomplished who run their research area.
Thank you so much for sharing about this information. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from many of our partners soon. We will now shift to presentation 2, where we'll hear from Dr. Nicole Sent and Dr. Drew from Central Connecticut State University, an Inspire partner in our Sanford Education Collaborative.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for taking the time in the busy startup of the school year to be here with us today, talking about this really important topic. So I'm delighted and humbled to be following Dr. Mantle's presentation. We at Central Connecticut State University were one of the many lucky universities to be on that last slide with all the universities, but we are a new partner and a new Inspire partner with Sanford, and delighted. And you can see the title of our small presentation is our SEL journey, further versus faster. And the reason why we chose that title is it harks back to the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And I can say that Sanford Inspire has helped us to do both, go further and faster. And you'll see as we talk and share our journey that we are, in essence, we're doing both of those at the same time. I think a lot of times when you're strategic planning around such big initiatives, we often think that you have to do one or the other. You either have to go further and go with a bunch, with a lot of colleagues, or faster going alone. And the reality is, in many ways, you can be doing both at the same time with this important work. So with that, I'd like to just, I'm a special educator by trade, so of course I've got my advanced organizer there. So I want to briefly talk about our timeline with this work. We're going to talk about some of the successes and challenges that we have experienced and the lessons learned, some of our future outcomes, and hope to leave some time for discussion. So with that, I would like to start with this public act. In Connecticut, our regulations for teacher certification haven't changed in quite some time, and the way that our legislative body and those in the steering wheel of teacher preparation often shape teacher certification and teacher preparation in our state is by these public acts. And this one's really important, and I've added some of the underlined parts of it. So this is an act that's really, really broad in scope, and it talks about evidence-based practices and classroom management. But the last sentence is really, really explicit, and it talks specifically about the importance of training teacher candidates in social emotional development and learning of children. And it talks explicitly about teaching teacher candidates around assessment and early intervention for students that display behaviors that may be associated with social emotional problems, treatment, assessment, and intervention. So it's startling the explicit nature of that component of that act. And that act was put in place in 2012, and it really was sort of a starting point for us. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see our trajectory. So that mandate was put on the books in 2012, effective July 2015. And it really set our trajectory around this work around social emotional learning here at the university. Immediately after that, our dean at the time and SEPS is the School of Education and Professional Studies. So our dean convened a task force, and the richness of our school is that our school is made up of not just teacher preparation departments, but also departments focused on counseling and nursing and social work and educational leadership. So the commission that the task force that the dean commissioned really was broad in scope and really had representation around all of those stakeholders. And the key charge at that point was to develop a module, and this was prior to our involvement in Sanford Inspire. But we developed a module around social emotional learning that sort of met those requirements. And it took a while. One of the things that Dr. Mantle just spoke about with the Sanford modules is how explicit they are and how user-friendly they are. But the work involved in developing them is something that is not necessarily easy for university faculty. So we labored through that process. It took us a while, and we're looking to revamp that now, especially with what we've learned about the resources that Sanford can provide, both through Inspire and Harmony. So we're very interested in leveraging that work to support the existing efforts that we've made. And then after 2014, we were able to come together and coalesce around a universal design for learning lesson plan. And that was really instrumental for us because it was developed also with input from all of our teacher preparation programs, and also exemplified the weaving together of social emotional learning into into universal design for learning and into planning. In 2017, you can see that there was a lot of faster there, and that faster is because it really focused, I would say, more on teacher preparation. So we agreed upon and developed and adopted what we call the central teaching practices, and I'll show you those in a little bit, but those are, in essence, they're high leverage practices, and they speak directly to the work of social emotional learning. In 2017, our Center for Excellence in Social Emotional Learning was approved by our governing body, which is the Connecticut Board of Regents. That was a long process. Another project that happened also in that year was a book that we, faculty across all those disciplines, published collaboratively around promoting SEL in the classroom. And then the following year, there were standards, SEL standards, that were approved and disseminated by our State Department of Education. And then finally, most recently, just this past spring, we had our inaugural SEL conference. And for those of you, when you get the slides, these are live links to those different pieces in time for us. Next slide. And so I wanted to share with everybody the Universal Design Framework. And this is really important for us because it both framed our lesson planning, but the important thing about Universal Design for us is that it really connects planning for social emotional learning. It weaves it into the fabric of planning and teaching for our teacher candidates. It provides a very explicit framework that really ensures that SEL isn't an add-on or something that you think about afterwards, or something that you think of as a tiered intervention, but that it's really knitted into the fabric of planning. And it really exemplifies for our teacher candidates that are really new to planning and implementing instruction that all learning is social and emotional. And the next slide is just a quick screenshot of that lesson plan template. And by developing it in collaboration across all of our teacher preparation programs, so that includes our elementary colleagues and secondary and K-12 partners, we were able to begin to integrate those kind of principles around universal design for learning and social emotional learning within the body of our teacher candidates planning for instruction across all those disciplines. So some of our successes, I would actually say the Universal Design for Learning was a huge success for us because it really spread the footprint and thinking and planning around social emotional learning to all of our teacher prep programs. But I think that some of our successes come by our design. Our school is very rich in the sense that we have these programs. So our school, as I said before, houses all of our teacher prep programs, counseling, ed leadership, literacy, nursing, physical education, and social work. And when the dean coalesced stakeholders across all those disciplines, he made sure to include all of those disciplines. So the synergy around social emotional learning is not just in our teacher preparation programs, it really does extend and is embodied in the work of those other professional learning departments. So that is a really important success of the work that we're doing, because the framework and the foundation is very strong. And then in teacher preparation, the adoption of the central teaching practices by all of our teacher preparation programs as outcomes that would be shared across all of our programs is another really important success. So that includes 23 what the field talks about as high leverage practices. And I'm going to show you a screenshot of those in a minute. But the last success also is our shared work with our K-12 partners. We have embedded in our structure here at Central Connecticut State University, we have a governing body that really brings our partners and in K-12 and our colleagues in teacher preparation together, shoulder to shoulder, to do some of this hard work. And here's my promised screenshot of the central teacher practices. And I've highlighted in a fuzzy yellow color the ones that are really explicit to social emotional learning. And those all fall under the broader, they've been chunked in different domains, but there is one that's called Central to Creating a Positive Learning Environment. And there are really explicit outcomes that our teacher candidates are learning and are infused within the preparation of their programs around these areas of building on students' assets, on establishing positive learning environments, supporting each student's social emotional development, and employing strategies that promote the development of student self-regulation, self-monitoring, reflection, and goal setting. So all of those are key components as we envision them to send to social emotional learning, and having them front and center in agreed upon outcomes across all our programs was a real success for us.
Great. So now I'm going to have the opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that we faced throughout the timeline that Joan discussed. Particularly, we had a major changing of the guard at all levels of our leadership, at the dean's level, the provost, our university president, many retirements in faculty. And this has been a challenge because we've had to wait for the new visions of our leaders to be articulated and to determine how they see the SEL work fitting with their goals for the university and School of Education. Luckily, there is alignment, but it's taken some time for that to unfold. So it feels like the work, as Joan has mentioned, has developed in fits and starts. We are excited that we're finally getting traction, but it was a challenge to be patient and wait for the right time to move ahead. And you see that in the timeline in terms of the further versus faster. Another challenge in Connecticut is that at a statewide level, all teacher candidates now need to meet passing standards on EdTPA, the Teacher Performance Assessment out of scale at Sanford University. In terms of alignment, as many of you will know, EdTPA overlaps very nicely with an SEL emphasis because it requires our candidates to consider the assets and needs and interests of learners, and also asks candidates to create a positive, welcoming, and safe learning environment. But sometimes faculty and leaders might be looking, with blinders in terms of EdTPA being a high stakes assessment. So the challenge has been for us to communicate with our colleagues and even our partner districts where our candidates are placed that our SEL focus is easily embedded within candidate success with EdTPA. So we've, done this with some limited resources in terms of supporting the articulation and alignment with EdTPA, and also articulation of SEL across programs, and particularly a scope and sequence within and across programs. So we've done that with our SEL, our central practices, as Joan has mentioned, but we still have more to do in terms of making that explicit within programs. Finally, we've had to make a conscious decision to focus on the development of our in-house curricula and resources for our teacher candidates, while at the same time our partner districts are clamoring for some support. So we have decided to kind of really strengthen our internal programs first, in hopes that we can integrate the research, be able to use Sanford Inspire, and then be able to then communicate and support our district partners in doing the work with SEL. So some of the strategies, the next slide, some of the strategies to overcome the challenges that we've faced have been to consider patience. Certainly we have to remind ourselves of that often. Also thinking about alternative paths. If we have goals and it doesn't seem to be emerging in the way we kind of envisioned it, kind of thinking about alternative paths to reach our goals. Continue to look for collaboration across programs. So we've got some real fabulous faculty in marriage and family therapy program, in our school counselor program, that have really supported this work and are ready to think about how to support teachers and in our teacher preparation program. So continuing to look to them to support collaboration across our programs. Even our leadership programs are really invested in the work as well as they prepare administrators and even doctoral candidates. We've also really looked to existing structures and processes. As Joan mentioned, we have a teacher education network that oversees all of our teacher preparation. And we have a cadre of partner districts that attend this network, these network meetings regularly, and they give us input into our program. So we've been able to draw upon their expertise and really focus on simultaneous renewal of our programs and in ways that ultimately will support their needs as partner districts with their SEL work. So this has been, the network has really been an opportunity for us to have regular times to touch base with our partners and to really focus on initiatives that would support our programs and their students and their teachers. So in terms of lessons learned, there have been many lessons, the first of which is that lasting change must be able to withstand leadership transitions. Which brings us back to that further versus faster. Our goals have been evolving consistently through these leadership transitions, but really we've decided that we want everything to be built on a firm foundation so that it becomes an integral part of our teacher preparation program outcomes and curricula, which is really why we started with things like the lesson planning, the UDL lesson planning template, and our central teacher practices, because those really are then a springboard for outcomes across programs. And now we're, once we have those outcomes, now we're kind of really working to actualize it, but we've decided that that foundation is essential rather than just working on individual programs that we might be teaching in. We really wanted to do it across our programs and really have a strong foundation. We also recognized early on that different domains within our School of Education and Professional Studies have a different stake, interest, and lens with SEL initiatives. So as Joan and I have both mentioned, school counselor faculty, marriage and family therapy faculty, special education, elementary, early childhood, secondary, school administration, everyone takes a different approach. And we've learned through time that really those perspectives need to be honored and invited to the table in order to come up with solutions that would best support kids, all the adults working with them, and foster large-scale school reform. And that really is an underlying piece of our work. As many of you know, recent studies have shown that many teachers are really just being handed SEL curricula in schools and are not necessarily receiving more than a half a day or 1 day professional development on implementing the SEL curricula without necessarily looking at their own social and emotional competence. And so the research is showing that in the absence of teachers really considering their own social emotional competence, even if the curriculum is evidence-based, the SEL outcomes for kids aren't as good as with teachers who have done this work. So that's also why we've decided to focus first on our teacher candidates and really bolster those preparation outcomes as well as our curricula so that we can help our candidates understand the relationship between their own social and emotional competence and their ability to implement SEL programs or curricula effectively. So some additional lessons that we've learned is that there's plenty of work to be done and many people interested in the work, but that a comprehensive approach will better serve all kids, will better sustain school reform, and will also help ensure that SEL initiatives are articulated across all grade levels. So at this point, Connecticut has standards in SEL for K3, pre-K to 3. We're seeking to really expand that and move beyond grade 3 as SEL is important throughout the grade spans. As Joan mentioned also, we're working with Universal Design for Learning to help our collaborators in-house and within our districts to see that all learning is social and emotional, as many of us deeply understand. Without safety and a sense of engagement and positive activation of the affective network, our learners won't have access to the areas of the brain that will help them perceive, understand, comprehend, process, retain, and then express their new learning. So our next steps is to seek additional funding streams, to seek funding streams to support pre-service teachers partnering with cooperating teachers as they implement SEL programs. We also, as Joan had mentioned earlier, we plan to revamp the module that teacher candidates are currently taking that is required based on that public act. So now that we have access to Sanford Inspire and ideally in the future Sanford Harmony, we would like to put both of those pieces into the module. So there's been a lot of research that's come out, and also our awareness and understanding of the resources that Sanford Inspire and Sanford Harmony provide, that we really would like to bolster that module and help our candidates to be learner ready day one to support all students' academic and social and emotional needs. Our goal is also to plan and develop a course-based module on teacher resilience, which is coming out of some of the research that we're doing here. We're going to pilot it in our student teaching seminar with special educators and hopefully in our Masters of Arts in Teaching program, where we have candidates that represent various secondary disciplines. Once we've implemented and received feedback from instructors, we hope to share that with other student teaching seminar faculty. So the last piece that I want to talk about is teacher resilience, which is part of our emerging line of research. And we're finding that that is the component, as I've mentioned before, that really is the prerequisite to teachers being able to implement any curricula, program, instruction of SEL in classrooms. And so this is really our focus as we work with our new leadership to refine the SEL Center and the annual SEL Conference, which was very well attended last year. We're also embarking on focus group research. We're going to be developing a survey to address teacher resilience and ultimately seek to plan an intervention that would support teacher candidates as well as in-service teachers in making more explicit the competencies of teacher resilience so that they can thrive in the profession. And so the last slide, which I don't really have time to speak about too much, but I'd be very interested in hearing feedback or questions from folks. This is our situational map, which has emerged from the focus groups and comprehensive literature review, addressing the competencies of teacher resilience as more than just a balance of protective and risk factors. And so as we engage in more focus groups across different disciplines, we're seeking to refine this model so that we can articulate the notion of teacher resilience as really a complex and comprehensive construct that leads to agency and efficacy, in particular to support students in learning academically, socially, and emotionally. So that is where we end our presentation, and we are delighted to be part of the panel. And we look forward to future partnership with Sanford Inspire, Sanford Harmony, and other universities on the call, and anyone that's listening.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today, Dr. Nicole Sant and Dr. Drew. Participants, this is your chance to answer any questions or share any feedback you may have from this presentation. Feel free to type any questions in the question box. We have a question that has come through. For the K-12 partnerships, do they also collaborate with dual credit, dual enrollment instructors?
We do have dual enrollment agreements with area schools, and those typically it's the area schools that we have that with our partners that do the work. So yes, it's the same districts. We have inroads to those districts on many different levels. We also have some pipeline programs that we're developing, and also really strong connections with those districts in this work as well. So teacher preparation pipelines from secondary schools to the university. Great question.
Thank you. Where would you recommend universities start if they want to build a partner or partnership with a center focused on SEL?
Yeah, so I think that question actually led us nicely into this next question, because we really believe that you need to start with the partner schools, really be informed by the needs and initiatives that they're undertaking. What we found is most schools have their own SEL initiatives or are looking to explore SEL initiatives and are looking to the university for some support and feedback. So that's certainly been a really important place to start. We also think that it's important to identify the strengths that you have at the university and really tackle what you'll be able to have the personnel and commitment from leadership, what you'll be able to meet in terms of your outcomes. So you may have broad visions and broad goals, but really just kind of start small. And then to grow from there. So I think that's a really important piece. Is there anything you wanted to add, Joan?
No, I have a really specific example. In one of our meetings last semester, we had our partners come, and we have conversations, problems of practice kind of conversations, and some really rich conversation came out of that. We asked a reflective sort of question around what does SEL look like in schools? And more importantly, what was really rich for us was we asked our partners what skills and knowledge and dispositions do they want to see our candidates have day one for them. So it was a really rich conversation. It's a great way to sort of get at this information about the importance of this work happening first in teacher preparation. It's a really powerful discussion.
Thank you. We have one more question, follow-up question to the dual credit, dual enrollment question that came through. In the teacher prep work for dual enrollment, are both Sanford Inspire and Sanford Harmony used?
Yeah, so I guess the question is the dual enrollment. We're having a hard time kind of translating that to what it would mean in our setting. Yeah. So we've just started with Sanford Inspire in across programs. We have it in our elementary program as one of our courses. The Special Ed 315 course that we have is an introductory course to meeting the needs of all learners in the general education classroom. It's got a real focus on designing specific instruction for struggling learners and also universal design for learning. And we have involved many of the Sanford Inspire modules in that course. So we've got an elementary section, a secondary section, and we also have it in our special education program. We have yet to explore Harmony. We're just beginning to explore the possibilities for Harmony. So we're looking forward to infusing that in our programs, but we don't have any cross endorsement programs per se where students get certified in both, special education and elementary. At this point, they're unique certifications. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. And I'll have the participant reach out to you if she has some additional questions about teacher resiliency as well that she'd like to learn more about. But she thanks you for your very thoughtful presentation today.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we are going to move on to our third and final presentation today. We are so fortunate to have our third presenters today, Dr. Markowitz and Dr. Gallagher, share about the work at the Center for Reading and Teaching the Whole Child in San Jose, California, and their impact of their partnerships on teacher education. Welcome, Dr. Markowitz and Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of these colleagues. Let's see, start with the next slide. So what I'm going to do is share with you a little bit about who we are at the Center for Reaching and Teaching the Whole Child, and what we've been doing, which is connecting social emotional learning, which you've been hearing a lot about, with culturally responsive teaching practices into what we call a social emotional and cultural lens. And I'll be introducing you to our social emotional and cultural anchor competencies framework, which is we see as a roadmap to help guide the work in teacher preparation and also in schools. Next. So I was a professor at San Jose State University, and I started the center in 2008. We are now independent, an independent project under fiscal sponsorship of community initiatives with a mission of integrating social, emotional, and cultural competencies into teacher preparation programs. Next. What we see as the key lever of change, a key lever for bringing social, emotional, and cultural competencies into the classroom is the teacher professional development pipeline. So you see that here, and what we talk about is that ideally you don't want any leaks between teacher preparation, beginning teacher support, and ongoing teacher support. And I'll be talking today particularly about what we've done with teacher preparation to integrate the lens into teacher preparation, and how that goes on at the same time in what we do with ongoing teacher support through the work with cooperating teachers. Next. So our goals at the center are, number one, to integrate this lens into teacher preparation and classroom teaching, to connect these anchor competencies to academic standards. And I'll show you a little bit later how they're actually, we see them as foundational to the achievement of academic standards. We're working on impacting 2 generations of educators at the same time. That is the teacher candidates and cooperating teachers. And we've been working with programs around the country through our teacher educator institutes that we developed. And what we're looking for is a pipeline of well-trained new teachers, as is everybody else on this panel. Next, please. So the assumptions that guide our work include change begins in teacher preparation. So that's part of it being a key lever for change in our schools. The need for a common language, we've seen that in the research we've done, that everybody is saying, you know, we're using all these different terminologies. It would be really helpful across the pipeline to have a common language. We believe in the use of the social, emotional, and cultural lens, that, as others have said, adults need to work on their competencies as well as the students. And what we add to it is that the social emotional learning has to be addressed within the social, political, and cultural contexts of students and teachers, and that it takes time. Our Teacher Educator Institute is a year-long process for teacher educators. Next, please. So I won't read this, but the definition of social emotional learning that we use is drawn from Castle's, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. And then next, also the research, as you all know, about the improvement in the attitudes towards self and others, academic performance, etc. I think that's why we're all doing this work, is it's just so critically important. And we have research that shows that it does have an impact. Next. So we add to this what we found to be really critical, which is the principles of culturally responsive teaching. Typically, those are separated into 2 different silos. You have SEL and you have CRT. And what we've done is, in our framework, bring them together. And looking at what the principles are, academic success and what's needed for that with diverse student population, the cultural competence, and the critical consciousness. So these 3 principles we've infused into our framework, and that's why it's called a social, emotional, and cultural framework. Next. And you can see here, there's so many different terminologies that are terms that are used in this field in general. And what we've been trying to do is bring it all together rather than having things siloed out so that teachers don't feel that they've got add-ons, as other people have talked here, that we want to get rid of the add-ons and say this is just part of how we go about our business of teaching. Next. So what we developed is what we call a social, emotional, and cultural lens. And then going to the next slide, what we do when we're using this lens is kind of like putting on a different pair of glasses. And what we help teachers to do is to think about asking different questions about their students that leads them to gather different kinds of data, and that therefore helps them to respond differently to students and in a much more positive, productive way that helps students to thrive and teachers to feel good about what they're doing. In the next slide, you see that the connection to, that this is built into the fabric of our work, and it's connecting the academic content and learning environment. Next. So what we have is a roadmap that we've developed, we call it a roadmap, that we hope helps teacher educators and those in the field to like what they need to be thinking about, what they need to be doing, the competencies they need to be addressing that will enable us, both teachers and students, to acquire the social, emotional, and cultural competencies. Next. So in doing this framework, one of the things that we did was we pulled from the Castle 5, but you can see I put here 30,000 foot level because what we found in our work with teacher educators that if we just talk about the Castle 5, it's like what actually happens in the classroom? How do I know that self-awareness is going on? So what we did is in answering that question, what does it look like in the classroom? We developed these 7, or identified these 7 anchor competencies that we say are kind of at the classroom or ground level. They're not one-to-one, obviously, the correspondence, but the anchor competencies are intended to enact, in a sense, the SEL competencies from Castle. Next. So I'm going to build out our framework for you, and then you'll see the whole thing together. So first of all, the goals of this framework: a safe, supportive learning environment, equity in teaching and learning, developing resilience and a sense of optimism, academic success, of course, and responsibility for the greater good. And then to that, we add on, next, the context. And this is core, and it's at the core of the framework because we think that the goals cannot be achieved unless we're attending to the context that both teachers and students bring to the table in the classroom. And that in order to succeed with social emotional learning skill development, we need to take that context into account. And that includes the family and individual, community, cultural, and socio-political context that we all live in. Next. So the next step in developing this framework, and you can see the next ring, is so what's the process for developing the lens that's going, and then we're going to talk about the actual content, which is the anchors themselves. But to develop the lens, and this will not come as a surprise to anyone, but exploring assumptions and beliefs is critical, providing a lot of excellent modeling, providing a lot of practice, and providing time to reflect. And it's not a linear process, it's iterative. You may go back from reflecting to seeing some modeling, or reflecting and going back to some more practice. But one of the things that we really encourage is that candidates, sometimes they see the modeling, sometimes they have a little bit of practice, but in terms of them being able to go out into the schools and actually do it their beginning year of teaching, what we've learned from our research is that they actually need to have a lot of time to practice, a lot of time to reflect, but that they also need to examine their assumptions and beliefs, because if those aren't in alignment, then even if they have the modeling, practice, etc., when they go out in the field, they're not necessarily going to do it. And then that leads to the next ring, next slide, which are the anchor competencies. And these are the 7 anchor competencies that we want to see teachers working on thinking about in the classroom and also encouraging them to develop these competencies in their students. And you can see that building trusting relationships has an asterisk by it, and that's because we've come to call it the super anchor, because none of the other anchors can be dealt with unless there's trusting relationships. Makes a lot of sense. But we found no matter what anchor we're talking about, we're also talking about trusting relationships. In any given lesson, a teacher may be dealing with 1, 2, 3, whatever number of competencies, and the more skilled they get at using these competencies, the more they're able to integrate them into their classroom work. Next, please. So you see the whole framework together, and what you see, the last ring is the examples of teacher moves. And we were very explicit in our efforts when we're looking at examples of teacher moves to be sure that we were looking at culturally responsive teaching practices as well. So if you look at, for example, in fostering a growth mindset, one of the teacher moves is articulating affirming counter narratives and shifting to positive self-talk. And that is very much related to culturally responsive teaching practices. When we talk about building trusting relationships, we're talking about employing trauma-informed practices, not having those be different than, but just part of. Going next, please. I'll just say one slide and then we'll skip on to the video. But if you look at mathematical practices and Common Core, when I talk about that the anchor competencies are essential, foundational to the mathematical practices, you can see making sense of problems and persevering in solving them. You need to have a foster growth mindset. You need to cultivate perseverance. That has to be going on the whole year for the students to be able to achieve this academic standard. And I think we'll skip over, although you can look on your own at the literacy, Common Core standard, connection to our anchor competencies, and then next. Also looking at the teacher moves, and that's something that you can refer to. I'd like you to see the video because I think the video is interesting to see a teacher actually putting this in practice. So we'll go to that. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Gallagher now. This was a teacher in his district. And just say that you can go to our website. We're going to be having a book coming out by Harvard Ed Press in the spring. Mike?
Hi, this is Mike Gallagher, and yeah, I'm happy to talk about our partnership with Nancy's organization, the Center for Reaching and Teaching the Whole Child. So I'm with Sunnyvale School District. If you can go to my first slide. There we are. So we are a school district of just short of 7,000 preschool through 8th grade students located in Sunnyvale, California, which is sort of between San Jose and Palo Alto in the heart of Santa Clara County and Silicon Valley. And our demographics are different from what many people would expect in Silicon Valley, which is a pretty affluent area. We do have areas of affluence, but we do have 35% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. And we are very, very ethnically and socioeconomically diverse. I want to say roughly a third of our kids would be classified as Caucasian, about a third are Asian, with a number of subgroups within that, and a third are Hispanic. Those are just kind of broad strokes, our demographics of our school district. And the teacher you saw in the last video was Lindsay Jacobson, who's a wonderful, wonderful teacher in our district who received a lot of her training through the center as a cooperating teacher who took student teachers. And as Nancy referred to, a part of our partnership has been really developing those two generations of teachers, the new teachers coming up through the pipeline and our teachers in service. And we also work with the New Teacher Center to work with our induction teachers. So if we can go to the next slide. This is how we've conceptualized for the last several years social emotional learning and academic growth in our school district. And we found a need to develop a framework like this because there were so many initiatives going on that individuals were referring to as SEL, and they were. So for example, if I can just pick one, positive behavior interventions and supports is implemented district-wide. And people would say we're doing PBIS, so we're doing SEL. We have a partnership with an organization called the Family Engagement Institute, which supports families and students, preschool students. And people would say, well, that focuses on SEL, so we're doing SEL. And they're right. Playworks is another. You can just go around the wheel there and see that there are all these different efforts, and we started to try to organize what we were doing and understand what we were doing in context with one another. So that led us to this framework, which of course has students and teachers at the center, recognizing that it's the core of all of what we do is the relationship between students and teachers. And I think that word relationship is really, really important. And we categorized what we were doing in kind of in three areas. I think the area when we started a few years ago that most folks referred to as SEL was in the area of care for students. So for example, we were very proud that we had a partnership with a local agency called the Community Health Awareness Council that provided counseling interns at all of our schools, and we're very fortunate with that. In California, that's pretty rare. But all of these services, by and large, were out of the classroom types of services. They weren't in the classroom, and they were meant to be supportive, and they were. And they're all important. Now, second step and Komochis, of course, are in the classroom activities, and I think they probably could meld into the bottom part of the model as well. The part where I think we've been really innovative as a result of this work, and with a lot of support from Nancy's group, and also an organization here called Acknowledge Alliance, is the Care for Educators. And so I heard the presenters from Central Connecticut referring to building the resilience of teachers as really, really important. And we've recognized that as important too. Acknowledge Alliance's mission is to build the caring capacity and or resilience of adults so that they can build the resilience of kids. And so they've helped us in a number of ways. Some of them include, we have resilience consultants on a number of our campuses, including our campuses with the highest needs in terms of poverty and trauma. We've also had educator support groups that have been led by licensed marriage family counselors out of Acknowledge Alliance that have really worked on building the resilience of teachers, and we have some wonderful success stories there as well. And also so Kaiser and Anthem are our two medical providers, and we look at them not just as benefits that we provide employees as part of their compensation package, but also as when we look at them, we think, how can they keep our teachers well, or our employees well, and how can they focus not just on health, but also on mental wellness as well. So we've made a lot of progress in that area. And then in the bottom part of the wheel is the area that I think a lot of us have been talking about today, and that's the focus on social emotional learning in instruction, which I'd say maybe just 5 years ago was less talked about than it certainly is now. Again, SEL was thought of as an out of the classroom thing that you did to support students, but now we're talking about, and a lot through Nancy's help with the work that she's doing with us, teachers looking at their instruction through an SEL CRT lens. And that's been really kind of groundbreaking for our district. So if we can go to the next slide. So these are the areas that we're focusing on in our school district. So of course, MTSS came into our focus the last 2 or 3 years. And, you know, if you think back to the mission statement that we posted at the beginning of my slide deck there, it refers to social emotional learning, behavior, and academic achievement. So we're constantly exploring the relationship between those three, not seeing them as three separate things, but seeing them as three areas that all contribute to each other and are necessary for achievement in all three areas. And we want outcomes in all three areas, which means that we have to do assessment in all three areas. And so that's kind of the second point there about identifying outcomes and assessments for SEL, and that's been a focus that we've had. We explored the DESA for a while, and now more district-wide, we're implementing some assessments through Panorama. And then finally, you know, I slipped up a few moments ago and talked about supports for teachers, which is an example of how we all need to focus on not just teachers, but all different classifications of educators. Anyone really who works in the schools, but especially those who work directly with students. So think of food service workers, paraeducators, et cetera. This model is the CRTWC model that Nancy talked about with great depth, and that we've adopted that this year as a model for us to focus on. And so, for example, we're doing work in math with Joe Bowler up at Stanford, and that primarily works on fostering growth mindset. So we ask our educators, when you're doing some professional development, where you're learning a new skill, where does it fit in the CRTWC model, so that you know the area that you're paying attention to and the areas that you still may need to pay attention to. So if we can go to the next slide. And of course, this is the MTSS pyramid. We have good discussions about how the three areas fit together. I would argue that SEL fits in the middle, or maybe as a foundation, but that's all just good food for thought. And if we can go to the next slide. And finally, teacher resilience. We're really focusing on teacher resilience in our district as a way of meeting the needs of kids, so that we're building the resilience of our teachers, seeing that as primary so that students can have success. And so you can see a quote here from a really important book called The New Lives of Teachers, from a couple of authors in England that I recommend. And so to the final slide. So these are some of our challenges that we're focusing on. as I mentioned, our non-teacher employees. We're thinking about what happens after school. Assessment continues to be a focus. And then there's always other competing instructional focus areas. For example, in our district, early literacy. So the chicken and eggs battle is, we have to focus on early literacy. That's a district priority, but we also have to focus on SEL. So which do we do first and how do we do them together? And then finally, differentiated training for staff and school leaders also, because everyone's in a different place. So that's kind of a summary of our work in Sunnyvale. And again, so much of it we owe to our partnership with Nancy and CRTWC.
Thank you so much, Dr. Markowitz and Dr. Gallagher, for sharing your exemplar work. This is a chance to type in any questions you may have about their work. And I was curious, Dr. Markowitz, how do you find the best districts to partner when you're engaging in this type of work?
We have the one that we've been working with has been Sunnyvale. That's been our labs district. And it's any school district that wants to work with the university. Like we work very closely with San Jose State University right now. And when they have partner school districts that want to work with them, then we can become involved with that. But it's starting with those who kind of the early adopters, and then moving it out to everyone.
Great. Well, you have your contact information there, so I know our participants can reach out with additional questions. I want to thank our panelists for sharing these valuable presentations where we learned about the amazing work you are all doing to support the integration of social emotional learning in teacher education. I also want to have a big thank you to Scott Page for being in attendance today. And Scott Page is our Senior Vice President of Sanford Programs and Acting Interim Director of Sanford Inspire, and he is leading the charge to support inspirational instruction and social emotional learning nationwide. At this time, I would like to open up to any final questions or any closing thoughts any of our participants have. I know we've heard a lot of information today, and you will receive a copy of the slide deck, and of course you can follow up later. But are there any additional questions or comments? Feel free to share in the question box now. And I would like to pose one question to our panelists to share any thoughts they have on this subject. Knowing that we are at a time when there are horrific violent events in our country that our children are hearing about, and there's more exposure to social media, how can we advocate at the university level for the importance of social emotional learning in teacher education programs to support critical life skills for student success?
Well, I'll take
Dr. Mantle, would you like to answer? Oh, Dr. Mantle?
Thank you very much. Well, my goodness, there are so many rich ideas that have been shared during this session. I wish I could sit with everybody for the rest of the day and just unpack all of this, because there are lots of dots to be connected. I think that, universities are in a particularly unique position to posture for leading transformation and change. And I think that we already see here that we have these three entities represented on this panel are interested in engagement with the schools. And I think that's the natural starting point for where we need to be. I think there's a readiness that needs to happen inside of faculty. If you happen to be with a university, it's very important that, I think first and foremost, that we are explicit about what we want to change, why we want to change it, how we want to change it, and really get some good solid philosophical underpinnings for where we stand, and hopefully in a united way in an academic unit, thinking that we could be a catalyst to be out there and bridge with a number of school districts in a very powerful way. So I think first of all, we have to get ourselves internally aligned. And I think that it's important to have the mindset of being the learner as we're being the teacher, being the researcher, and really rolling up our sleeves and getting into all of the different lines of research that have been conducted by some very reputable folks over many years, and to look at some of these exemplary practices to determine where we want to posture ourselves as we become an important voice in our regions and in our state and perhaps nationally. I'm going to take it a step further in that we do have a consortium, and I would hope that our consortium could evolve into a very good critical mass of institutions of higher education who can really be out front torch-bearing in this way. Again, united we stand, and we have an opportunity to become a real force of change. You know, I think that ultimately, I think about this a lot, you know, is it an ultimate goal, a question to all, for us to ultimately change attitudes, to change policy, to change legislation, to change standards and teacher preparation, and, you know, ultimately to change professionals that we're preparing to change the kids in the classrooms. So it's, I think we can think small and stay in our own region, or we can think on a really wide scale about what it is we want to change. There is no better time for this calling, I believe, and I think we're here at the right time and place for this discussion.
Dr. Markowitz, did you want to share one closing thought?
I totally support what Dr. Mantle's saying, and I was going to say that universities need to come together and create a tipping point so that it becomes like everybody comes out of teacher prep with the competencies that are needed, so that it's not something that just comes into the school and then leaves the school, as so many educational initiatives have done, but that this becomes part of the drinking water.
So can I add one more closing thought? I think that there's a lot of focus right now on trauma-informed instruction and supports in our schools. And I think that we need to make sure that we strike a balance between proactive measures as well as those trauma-informed. I think we need to throw supports to both ends of those spectrums.
Thank you all for participating in today's virtual webinar panel. Shortly, you will receive a brief survey to gather your feedback from this webinar panel. We thank you for taking the time to complete the survey so we can design future panels with topics most relevant to your work. Thank you all for participating, and we hope you all have an inspirational day.